Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Today we're diving into a really unique body of work. These are teachings centered around spiritual energy, vibration, and how they interact with our modern lives.
Right, and the material we're digging into comes from talks by Sheikh Nurjan Meramati. It offers a pretty fascinating perspective on well-being, connection, and maybe the unseen realities around us.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive, basically to unpack the core ideas, pull out the most important nuggets from these teachings.
And see what insights they might offer us today.
Yeah. Prepare to look at energy, technology, spirituality, maybe through a slightly different lens.
Okay, let's dive in. So right off the bat, these teachings hit you with this fundamental idea. Our life, at its very core, is about raising our vibration.
Mm-hmm. And they argue that kind of simultaneously, a lot of the world around us seems almost designed to actively lower that vibration.
And this vibration, it's described as a kind of shield, an energy shield we naturally emit.
Yeah, exactly. For protection, both physical and spiritual.
A shield of energy. That's quite a concept. How do they explain that?
Well, they use a really compelling analogy, actually, comparing it to the Earth's Van Allen belt. That huge 60,000-mile radiation shield protecting the planet.
Okay.
The teaching suggests that we as humans are sort of a microcosm of this.
Yeah.
We have our own internal earth, so to speak, and this surrounding energetic shield.
Wow.
And they link this idea to verses in the Quran pointing out that Allah Almighty shows signs both, on the horizons and within ourselves.
Okay, here's where it gets, really interesting, maybe even a bit challenging for many of us. The teachings point directly at everyday technology, really common stuff.
As a source of negative energy bombardment, yeah. Things like microwaves, Bluetooth signals, even earphones are mentioned.
Seriously, earphones.
As emitting energies that, according to this source, aren't beneficial for our cellular function or brain function.
Okay, that's quite a claim.
Well, it's presented less as being against the technology itself, more a call to recognize its energetic impact. The teaching states that science knows everyone is being bombarded by all sorts of frequencies.
Right. So if we're constantly being hit by these energies, what happens if our personal frequency, our vibration, drops too low?
That's where the connection gets really direct. A lowered frequency is linked straight to losing hope, a diminished ability to protect ourselves.
Leading to things like depression. Hopelessness.
Exactly. That's what the teaching suggests.
So that energy shield, it's not just for external stuff, it's for internal resilience too.
Precisely. When that energetic shield drops, it leaves you vulnerable, open to being affected by immense negative energies.
An invisible reality.
An invisible reality, yeah. The source compares these energies to unseen waves or even creatures that we don't perceive directly. A bit like how we don't see TV signals or Bluetooth waves all around us.
But we know they exist.
We know they exist, and they carry information. So these negative energies, according to the teaching, they essentially pull the positive charge right out of you, leave you depleted.
And that depletion, it shows up as feeling stuck.
Yes, that's the analogy used. Like a Tesla car with no charge. It's built for amazing performance. But if the battery's dead...
it's just stuck, going nowhere.
Exactly. So when your internal energy drops, depression and anxiety can set in, and you feel like, quote, nobody can move you. Nothing seems to matter anymore.
That's more than just feeling tired then. It's a profound inability to act or even care.
It's described as a fundamental deficiency of energy. And the key point is, it's not something you can just will away.
Or recharge just by wanting it.
Right. And that constant external bombardment, according to this source, really contributes to this state of depletion. Okay, so if the problem is this energy depletion, from outside factors and maybe internal blockages, the solution presented is, recharging, consciously raising your frequency.
And the source material has a very specific idea about what powers us, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It really emphasizes that the true battery for human beings isn't just the physical body. It's primarily the soul.
Ah, okay. So while we feed the body with food...
feeding the soul needs a totally different kind of sustenance.
And how do these teachings suggest we access that spiritual power source?
Well, they propose that meditating and contemplating are key practices. They connect us to what's described as a free, everywhere power source, a divine grace that Allah Almighty has already provided.
That sounds accessible, but is it easy?
Well, the teaching implies it takes conscious effort, and understanding. It even brings in some interesting historical points.
Like what?
Like the past, common use of copper. copper lines, copper pots, dishes.
Why copper?
The source links this to drawing energy from the air, and it also mentions copper's known antimicrobial properties. But crucially, it links energy in the body to the presence of copper in the brain. Yeah, suggesting these energetic realities were maybe understood in the past, but have become sort of lost knowledge. And potentially, this lack of accessible energy contributes to modern issues like anxiety and depression.
So going back to basics, what are the most fundamental, free gifts Allah Almighty gives us for building this energy according to the source?
According to these teachings, the core gifts are our breathing and our chanting.
Breathing and chanting. Okay. And what about people who find it hard? Like they can't seem to raise their frequency or connect on their own?
Well, the guidance suggests seeking out people who are already working with this energy, those who can teach and guide the process.
Like spiritual teachers?
Yes. Specifically, the teachings describe Sufism, or tasawwuf, as the science dedicated to building this spiritual energy.
Okay. So the teachings offer practical tools, right? Rooted in ancient wisdom for actually building and protecting this energy. What's one of the first key steps mentioned?
One really fundamental wisdom highlighted from the prophetic way is the reality of water.
Water as a tool for spiritual energy. How does that work?
It's described as like a best friend for washing off and burning away negative energy. The principle is basically you can't effectively meditate or connect if you've got negativity clinging to you.
So you need to be clean first.
Yeah.
Spiritually clean.
Exactly. Physical purification is directly linked to energetic readiness.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating here is the mention that if water isn't available, clean sand can be used.
Sand?
Yeah. And teaching points out that scientifically, sand is known to neutralize energy.
Yeah.
So it kind of validates this traditional practice from a modern perspective.
That is interesting. So the main practice then starts with?
The core reality is to perform ablution, which is known as Wudu. That's the ritual washing. And then to sit for meditation and conscious breathing.
Right. Tell me more about this breathing technique. It's not just regular breathing.
No, it's described as consciously calling upon the breath of the most merciful, actively asking for divine light and grace from Allah Almighty to, dress you with each breath.
So it's not just taking in air, it's like receiving something specific.
Exactly. As you breathe in, you're consciously inviting the mercy of Allah Almighty right into your heart. This breath, according to the teachings, it dresses the blood.
Dresses the blood.
Yeah. And the iron within your system. It nourishes your lungs and heart by bringing in its purities while you consciously exhale impurities, negativity.
And where does this light, this energy, go?
This light and energy, which is referred to as nazma, it specifically goes to the heart, dressing the heart, making an imprint upon the blood, and then nourishing all the organs through that revitalized blood flow.
Wow. So this practice, the conscious breathing and contemplation, it's a way to kind of train your system.
Yes, exactly. It trains you to slow down all the external noise of life and become receptive, become able to receive this divine energy. It's presented as really vital, not just for dealing with the challenges of the physical world,
but for building something for the eternal reality too.
Precisely.
Okay, it makes sense that not everyone immediately feels drawn to this kind of inner work, but the teaching mentions those who do feel a sort of calling.
Yes, absolutely. Those who are inspired to seek this energy, they often feel a deep hunger for this reality, a kind of yearning that drives them to search until that soul's need for sustenance starts to be quenched.
And the path isn't always straightforward, is it? The source uses another analogy here, I think.
It does, the analogy of cable TV.
Cable TV, how does that fit in?
Well, the idea is the signal, the divine grace, is everywhere, right? Readily available. Mm-hmm. But to actually receive it, you generally need the right equipment and, proper adjustment.
Unless you're one of those rare people who can just
hotwire the connection themselves, yeah. Which is apparently not most people.
Right. So who helps set up that connection? Who's the cable guy in this scenario?
This is described as the essential role of the sheiks, the spiritual guides. They're presented as being like the cable guys in this analogy.
Okay. And in a world that the source describes as having an overwhelming tide of negativity, how do these guides actually help?
Well, the teaching explains that if you haven't yet reached that level of grace, or you haven't established that connection yourself, the guide assists you by their mere presence sometimes, by their teachings, certainly, and by the energetic reality they carry. They help push away the negativity that might be hindering you.
Kind of clearing the path.
Exactly. And they teach you the specific methods, the how-to for connecting to your own spiritual reality. But, and this is important, this connection is always by the permission of the divine.
So it's more than just listening to lectures then. It sounds like an energetic relationship.
Absolutely. Accompanying these guides, observing their practice, really learning from their energy and their realities. That's what teaches you the subtle ways, how to breathe properly, how to meditate effectively.
And crucially, how to maintain that vital connection.
Yes, so that their spiritual energy can support you, elevate you. And these teachings, they ultimately tie everything back to this fundamental reality of sound and vibration, drawing heavily from the deep understanding found within Sufism.
Okay, sound and vibration. How is that applied practically?
Well, a central practice is praising and praying upon the prophetic reality of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him.
Reciting salawats, the blessings upon him.
Exactly. Reciting salawats is said to create this immense purifying vibration upon yourself. It calls positive energies towards your soul and actively pushes away negativity.
So it's not just a devotional act, it's also an energetic one, like it does something.
Precisely. The teaching presents this almost like a law of energy. Calling upon positive realities actively pushes away the negative. It's explained further that positive associations, being around positive people or energies, can actually pull negative charge off people, helping to cleanse them.
And the opposite.
Whereas negative associations, or being around negativity, can drain your positive charge, leaving you feeling depleted after interacting with them.
Okay, that makes sense. So this brings us to the daily routine that's recommended in these teachings. What does that actually involve?
Right, the daily practice. It involves meditation, that conscious breathing we talked about, chanting a divine mantra known as dhikr, and making personal supplication, or dua.
And the salawats are key too.
Yes, reciting salawats is specifically highlighted as immensely powerful for building this internal energy.
Can you walk us through the steps, like the recommended practice?
Sure. It includes several key elements. First, performing wudu, the ritual washing, to ensure you're physically clean.
Okay.
Then sitting in a clean, pure area, connecting internally, trying to really feel the presence of your heart.
Right.
Asking for forgiveness. This is described as a kind of internal cleansing, an internal wudu.
Ah, interesting.
Then reciting certain specific short prayers, often mentioned as doing so 3 times. And then crucially, asking for connection to truth and actively seeking connection with the presence of the sheikh, the guide.
How does one do that?
Well, it involves a moment of realizing, I am nothing in humility while asking for this connection, and specifically asking for the light, the energetic reality of the sheikh to dress and capture your heart.
That's the rabita, the connection.
That's the practice known as rabita, yes. The spiritual connection.
And this isn't just a one-off thing you do.
Oh no, definitely not. This foundation should ideally be done daily. And according to the teachings, the optimal time is after every prayer, every salah.
Wow, okay. And you mentioned different types of meditation within this.
Yes, there are different focuses. One form involves visualizing and breathing in light, bringing it into the heart, and consciously exhaling any negativity or mental clutter, what the Source actually calls madness.
Exhaling madness.
Another involves performing dhikr, the chanting of divine names, but doing it with contemplation, and specifically doing it in the presence of the sheikh or guide, whether physically there or through visualization. This builds the relationship in that world of light and energy.
It sounds like maintaining this connection to the guide, the rabita, is really paramount.
It's absolutely central to the practice described here. The feeling that's cultivated is, I am always with my sheikh, and my sheikh is always with me.
That feeling is key.
That feeling is key, yes. The teaching emphasizes that you get out what you put in, basically, in terms of your focus, your sincerity. Faith, in this context, is feeling that connection and continuously asking to keep it strong.
What if you don't feel it?
Well, the teaching says pretty directly, if you never bring the sheikh to mind, the disconnection is kind of your own doing. You have to actively engage with it.
Right. And how is this connection integrated throughout the day or the week? It's not just in that specific meditation time.
No, not at all. This spiritual connection, the rabita, is meant to be integrated consciously before prayer, salah, during communal chanting nights, dhikr nights.
Oh.
By visualizing yourself actually present in the association, the jalsa of the sheikh, even by listening to their talks while intentionally maintaining that connection in your heart. Ultimately, the consistent practice always comes back to having wudu, making that connection, the rabita, and then performing your prayer, your salah afterwards. This is seen as sealing and protecting yourself, With divine permission, of course.
And the source links this to scripture.
Yes, it grounds this in the Quranic command to keep the company of truthful servants.
So this connection, it really becomes more than just a ritual. It's like a way of life.
Exactly. It's described as a continuous process, almost like putting on essential spiritual clothing that you wouldn't dream of leaving the house without.
Spiritual clothing, I like that.
Yeah, it's presented as being as vital as, remembering your keys or putting on your actual clothes before you face the world.
And the teachings contrast this simplicity with something else, something that makes it seem difficult.
Yes, the source really emphasizes that this whole process, at its core, is simple. It contrasts this inherent simplicity with the overcomplication and difficulty that it attributes to Shaitan, the devil.
Whose tactic is to make it seem hard.
Whose primary tactic, according to this teaching, is to make things that are inherently simple and beneficial seem incredibly difficult or overwhelming. But the connection itself, that's a lifelong process, something you continuously nurture.
Okay. So we've taken a pretty deep dive into these specific teachings from Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi. We've explored the concepts of spiritual energy, the challenges posed by the modern energetic landscape.
Right. The tools offered for raising our vibration through breath, contemplation, purification.
And the really central role described for spiritual guides in establishing and maintaining that connection.
Yeah, the core message, if we distill it down from this source material, seems to be about building an internal shield of energy through conscious, consistent practice.
And actively seeking connection to divine power sources, and importantly, the guides who, according to these teachings, can help facilitate that access.
It emphasizes recognizing that external factors are constantly trying to deplete this vital energy.
It definitely presents a holistic view. Physical cleanliness, mindful breath, deep contemplation, seeking spiritual guidance, they're all deeply intertwined.
In maintaining spiritual vitality, yeah. And building that relationship in the unseen world of light.
This deep dive into Sheikh Nurjan Mirammadi's teachings really suggests that cultivating inner energy and connection isn't just a fleeting activity or a hobby.
No, it's presented as foundational, a lifelong process, as essential and habitual as, maintaining your physical appearance or remembering your necessities before stepping out into the world, always ensuring that spiritual clothing is on.
So as you reflect on these ideas we've unpacked, what really stands out to you from this exploration? How does this specific perspective on energy and connection resonate maybe with your own understanding?
And here's a thought to perhaps leave you with, inspired by these teachings. Given the source's claim that pretty much everything around us subtly influences our energy, what deliberate conscious steps could you perhaps integrate into your day, maybe starting right now?
Steps to intentionally choose.
Yeah, to choose environments or practices or connections that actively work to elevate your vibration. Much like ensuring that spiritual clothing is always securely in place before you face the day.
Something to think about. Until our next deep dive.